Hey, it's time for this week's Pastors Forum. Hi, I'm Byron Tyler. Glad to have you join us today. Last week we got together with Pastor Grover Westover of the Harmony Baptist Church located in Haywood County around Whiteville, Tennessee.
Right.
And it's so good to have you back, Pastor.
Thank you, Byron, for having me back.
I really appreciate the transparency of you sharing last week, your heart, your story. Your dad worked for a shoe company when you were growing up, Brown Shoes.
Right. Well, actually, he worked in the factory where they made shoes.
Okay.
At one point, we moved down to McNairy County, and we worked in the Brown Shoe Company there in Selmer. Dad had a degree from UT Knoxville in agriculture and wanted to be a county agent. But when Dad was a teenager, he lost his arm due to a drunk driver. And he lost his right arm. And at that time, they said, well, you can't be a county agent, with one arm. I don't understand the theory there, but anyway, he went on to get to get a job here in Memphis with the welfare department, as it was called at that time, until a position opened up in Jackson, where he went to work for Services for the Blind. And so that put me in contact with a lot of visually impaired people. And he would go into the homes of folks throughout West Tennessee and give them some direction as far as maybe a young person who was blind maybe could go to school or find some type of employment. And so I met a lot of interesting people through that line of work.
I was going to say, you learned a lot of values from your father, it seems like.
Absolutely.
Value of hard work.
Right. He really did. Dad was a hard worker. He did anything that anybody else could do with two arms. He tied his own shoes, tied his own necktie. And he expected me and the kids to not to slack off when it came time to work in the garden or mow the yard or whatever needed to be done.
What a great lesson! What a great man. Another thing, as we were wrapping up last time, you were sharing with me your story. Your first wife, how after you came to Harmony, decided that she did not want to be married to a pastor anymore.
Right.
And that relationship ended. Through divorce.
Right.
And, I can't imagine the emotions that you had to go through thinking, what do I do now?
Well, I think it reiterated to me the fact that God takes us where we are and takes us to where he wants us to be. And it reiterated to me the fact that I, even though I'm a pastor, am a human being. And that pastors, preachers encounter difficulties just like anybody else. And we go through all of that range of emotions. Of course, after a divorce, there's you go through that time of depression. You go through that time of wondering, what's around the next bend, and especially raising a son. And wanting him to have a positive relationship with his mom and his dad both. So there's just a whole lot of emotions that go on there. But I think that it helped me to empathize or sympathize with others that are going through that same experience.
Yeah.
And also I thought, well, am I going to my earlier work experience actually was in radio. And from the time I was a teenager in high school till the late 70s, early 80s, I worked in radio. So I thought, well, if all else fails, I could maybe go back into radio, although they don't play records anymore and the cart machines are gone. So I'd have to relearn that all again. I didn't particularly want to do that, but God was gracious, and I'm more convinced every day that God put me where he wanted me.
Part of the story, too, that I think is so wonderful is the fact that there was a church at Harmony Baptist that loved you.
That's
I mean,
right.
and there's so oftentimes we as believers have a tendency to judge and pass judgment on our brothers and sisters in Christ without not always knowing all the details.
That's right.
We just have this mindset, and we box people in, and there's no mercy, there's no love of Christ. But these folks extended enormous love and mercy to you.
The one picture that I keep in my mind, Byron, is when I shared with our deacons what was going on, and they opened their arms and said, "We want you to stay." Then I knew that I needed to share with the entire church what was going on. So the following Sunday, after I preached, I had a prepared statement to read, and so I stood before the church, and here's just a few weeks after I'd come, and after the service was over, I said, "Would you please be seated?" And, when the pastor says that, you don't know what to expect, And I said, so I read my statement about what was going on. And our music director, Brother Benny Morrison, who has directed the music there for well over 50 years, embraced me, and he came up and stood by my side and said, "I think we need to come by." Before anybody had a chance to say anything or do anything, he said, "We need to come by and encourage our pastor and love on him." And so they did. And I knew that from that moment on, all eyes were going to be on the preacher. And, so I took particular care to always live a life that would exalt the Lord and would not bring disdain upon the name of Christ, upon the church. And, and I understand that God-loving people and churches have different ideas about whether a man who has been divorced should serve as a pastor, and understand that. And this is a local church issue, and a lot of folks have different ideas about that, and that's fine and well. But from that point on, our church never made it an issue. I knew what God had called me to do. There was a work to do there, and so we went about doing the work. And it's never been an issue. And even after my wife and I, Judy, married, of course, she was from Haywood County and was a member of the Brownsville Baptist Church, and she and her family were members there for a long time. They welcomed her with open arms and just loved on her, and it's just been a God thing ever since.
It was that checkbook cover that introduced you to your wife, Judy, now, as you mentioned last week.
Right. As
you went into this bank, a member of your church suggested that, hey, if you wanted some companionship, she knew of a lady who loved the Lord, was faithful to God. Her husband had passed away, I guess, due to cancer.
Right. He had melanoma cancer, and her first husband, Jerry Stutz was his name, was very loved and very well respected in the community, and was very involved in sports in the Brownsville, Haywood County area. He coached Little League baseball and just was very active in sports. That was another challenge because all of her boys they played football and baseball. If you could throw it, kick it, punt it, or they did it. And they were hunters. Well, I never got into any of that. I was the guy on the playground that got picked last, to play on a softball team. I grew up playing music. I was in the high school band and started playing guitar in some country groups in the area. So my point of reference was not the football field at all. And so it was not until after Judy and I married that I said, well, I guess I'm going to have to learn about football. And so I did, and I love football. I love watching the Balls and the Haywood County Tomcats. We are big supporters of them. So, and then I got into playing some bluegrass music with a group, a couple of folks here in Memphis that I play with from time to time. And so that's where a lot of preachers play golf or hunt or fish. I pick. I pick.
I love it. I love some good bluegrass music. I wish you had brought, what do you play, guitar?
I do.
Well, I wished you had brought your guitar, and I brought my ukulele this morning. We could have had a little fun, couldn't we?
We could have had a jam session right here.
We might have been able to do that. And so that really was one of the challenges of blending the families together. I mean, what were some other things that you guys had to do that maybe were, you weren't prepared for in trying to blend the family together?
Well, of course, my son was involved in music from junior high. right on, and he was not oriented towards sports either. So that was sort of a blend that we had to make. And then in the area of our church, although she grew up in Haywood County and was familiar with Harmony and a lot of the members there, she moved her membership to our church, of course, and became very active in the church. So that was probably she had to do more of the changing than I did. And all. So
in this area you're in now, do you have a favorite fishing hole? Do you like to get away and sink some worms, or you still a guitar man?
I'm still a guitar man. I keep saying, in fact, our sons for 2 years in a row gave me a fishing rod, and they're still hanging in my shed with the tag still on them. And I keep saying every summer I'm going to get out and do some fishing, and I haven't done it yet. I find my time given, my recreational or free time given to playing music.
I like that. That's great. That's one of the reasons I mentioned ukulele. I'm not a very accomplished player, but my son gave me one a couple of Christmases ago, and I just, it's something fun to do.
Right.
I really enjoy it.
I became a member of the Jackson area Plectral Society in Jackson, and we have a bluegrass jam every Thursday night at the Old Country Store there, and some of the folks that are listening to WCRV are familiar with that.
Thursday nights?
Thursday nights.
What time?
About 6 o'clock every Thursday night.
Now, is this going on even through the wintertime?
Yes, through the wintertime. We meet inside the store, and if you're familiar with the Casey Jones complex there's a railroad museum across the parking lot,
yes.
And we have some groups that meet in there, and then in the store as well. And we just play bluegrass music and a lot of gospel music for 2 or 3 hours.
Now, Grover, I wanted to ask you about your connection with Bott Radio Network and how, of course, we're here in Memphis broadcasting. You're up closer to Brownsville, around Whiteville, and what this station means to you and your community. I mean, you called me and said, hey, I'm interested in Pastor's Forum. And let me just say this. If you're a pastor out there right now and you hear this program, and I haven't had you on the program, please call me. I love when pastors call me and want to be on the show. So you called me and initiated this.
Right, I did. In fact, I think I talked with you 2 or 3 years ago, and we were going to set up something, and I got busy and you got busy, and I'm not sure what happened, but we just sort of missed the mark there. But I've been listening to WCRV pretty much ever since I've been in Haywood County, and was just very interested in the programming here, and having a radio background. Just enjoyed listening to the various ministries and the preachers, and I was just glad to have an outlet in the area that I could listen to and get some good sound biblical teaching. Any
favorite time of day or favorite teachers you like to listen to?
Of course, Charles Stanley is always one of my favorites. And, of course, Dr. Rogers still is one of my favorites. And we generally, when we our evening service is over, and I turn on the radio in the summertime when we can still get the signal up in Haywood County, I turn on and listen to my buddy Steve Gaines and hear part of the Bellevue's evening service.
And so I guess from time to time during the summer you get to hear Pastor's Forum too.
I do. Generally on Sunday afternoons when I'm out in the car.
Right. Well, Pastor, when are the service times at Harmony Baptist?
We have Sunday school at 10 o'clock and worship at 11, exactly when God designed for worship to happen, at least in a country church. But Sunday school at 10 and worship at 11. And then our evening service is at 5 o'clock. And then we follow the evening service at 5 with our discipleship training program at 6, and midweek services on Wednesday at 6:30.
If somebody wanted to contact you, connect with you, maybe something that we shared over these past 2 programs, is there a number they can call?
Sure, they can call me directly. My number is area code 731, and my number is 780-2001. Or, again, you can find us on Facebook. Just type in Harmony Baptist Church, and it'll come up Whiteville, but that's our church.
Pastor Grover Westover, thank you so much, my dear brother, for what you're doing for Christ's kingdom
in
Haywood County, and being our guest this week.
Thank you so much for having us.
Friends, that's all the time we have on this week's Pastor's Forum. Again, my appreciation to Pastor Grover Westover of Harmony Baptist for these past 2 weeks joining us, sharing his story, and I hope you'll pray for this ministry too. Thanks for stopping by. That's all the time we have this week. I'm Byron Tyler. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.